Our hosts today are Michael Robertson. He's an SPCT and enterprise coach, as well as Matt Lasater, founder and CEO of Engaged Agility and Initiate AI. If you're attending this webinar, I will put you on mute, but please ask whatever questions you have in the chat. We'll be checking them throughout the presentation and at the end. So no fear, ask as many questions as you like. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Matt Lasater.
Perfect. Thanks, Hannah. So we have been studying and talking to clients and everybody else about AI, and we're starting to notice some trends that, I don't know, it's trends that we've noticed for a long, long time with many other things in life. And as we were thinking about what is it that's making these AI initiatives struggle, it was that they're waiting in a waterfall queue. And Mike and I kind of talked about it. We came up with some things. So we're going to go through that today. Like Hannah said, feel free to use the chat. We'll be watching it as we go. Raise your hand. We don't mind if you have questions in the middle of the webinar. We're happy to chat about stuff. It's pretty informal here. So feel free to chime in anywhere. So I'm Matt Lasater. Like Hannah said, I founded Engaged Agility, and Mike is one of my SPCTs. He goes out and helps all the clients with any problems that they have. Mike, go ahead, introduce yourself a little bit more. Tell us about being Canadian and stuff or something.
Oh, well, that's a long conversation. Well, folks, as Matt mentioned, I'm originally from Canada. This is actually a picture of Nova Scotia in the background. So I like to keep it close to my heart, but I've been in Huntsville, Alabama for the last 26 years. Been in both government and commercial space. Got involved with Lean and Agile in the mid-teens of 2000, and then ended up as an RTE on a U.S. Army and Air Force joint program in Huntsville. And that was about 2019, and then migrated from being an RTE to a SPC and a consultant and an SPCT. And so I've seen some interesting things out there, both from the technology side and the business side. I kind of live in the space where those things meet. And I think that's probably enough about me. Happy to be here today and have some great conversations with you folks.
Perfect. All right, so here's a question. You guys can use your emoticons or whatever it is that Zoom calls them to answer it, but how many people have seen AI make some individual, maybe it's you, dramatically faster? Anybody seen it take a day's worth of work and turn it into 30 minutes? Yeah. Dramatically, yes. So I've seen it because when I create proposals, I can dump all of my previous proposals into AI, and I can say, hey, I need to write a new one. Here's the notes that I took on it. And it gets me about 90% there in about 30 seconds, which is really good. But here's the next question. What about an organization? Has anybody's organization just sped up as much as any given individual might have, or even half as much? Nope, no thumbs. Oh, I get one thumb. Good deal. Yeah, I think that's kind of what we're seeing out there. AI has changed the speed of work, and it's changed the speed of work for a lot of different people within an organization, the developers, marketing, lawyers, HR, whoever it is. We've seen their individual work get much faster, but we haven't seen the organization as a whole find a lot of value in it. And so the question really becomes, why? And as Mike and I were talking, we kind of said, you know what? Anytime a change happens, AI is a change. Anytime it happens, there's ripple effects that happen throughout the entire organization. And what we've had happen here is that at the team level, we see the engine that they're using to build all the stuff. We see it going much, much faster, but the feedback loops from the team to the program to the portfolio, it's much slower. It's much slower all the way up, and things at the top layers aren't moving as quick. Mike, tell us a little bit more about this.
Well, you know, folks, as we all know, in some shape or form, regardless of what framework you're using, Strategy comes from the portfolio, right? Leaders get together, they start to feel out what's working in the market, what's not working, they create a vision, and then they're creating work items of some sort to filter down to the teams to execute on that vision. And the thing about it is, when that system is all working together and flows well at the same pace, then you have some harmony there, right? You're able to deliver on a comfortable space. The question is, what happens when you change the rate that one of these parts of the system is working at and the other parts aren't able to match? And this is kind of the conversation that Mac and I got into about where do the bottlenecks move to? Leadership has always kind of said, we think the bottleneck's at the development stage because, and then they have a long list of reasons why. Not sure that was always true, but AI has kind of raised visibility on that subject. And that's what we're looking at today, a little bit deeper.
Yeah, back in the early to mid 2000s, I always said that Agile isn't going to solve your problems, but it's going to put everything under a microscope, and the things that are doing really good will be better, and the things that are not doing so good, it's really going to shine a light on those. And I think AI is doing that exact same thing. It's really making the bottlenecks, it's making the pain stand out. We created an amazing slide here that everyone will understand, I'm sure. Organizations have goals that they want to achieve. And the goals go through an idea phase, they get approved, maybe they get some funding, they're prioritized, there's development that happens, we validate, we learn on it. AI has shifted this because, like Mike said, everything used to be, hey, I give stuff over to development, we get the funding and prioritize it, development gets started, and then I have to wait 3 months, 6 months, 6 years to get something to happen. But now it's kind of switched. Everything back to the left is now what's causing the bottleneck. And we know this because we're systems thinkers. We know that when you fix one bottleneck or when you make a change at one bottleneck, it's not that it solves everything in the system, but it solves, it just moves the bottleneck to a different part of the system. So we're thinking that, hey, the rate that teams can develop the stuff is no longer where it is. We've got to get the portfolio to be able to function in similar ways. But we already know the answer. We've known the answer for a while. We've got lean and agile principles that guide us to how do we do this? And they matter more now than ever because, like I said, agile kind of, it shined a spotlight where your problems were, but AI shines the spotlight there even brighter, and it makes the pain from having maybe less than great practices at your portfolio level, it makes them even more painful. So it's not that the principles still matter, it's that they matter more. And the first one that we want to talk about is how AI made teams faster. And we think that one of the principles that we really need to apply here is the idea of decentralizing decisions. There's a link here. It's a video that I made, I don't know, probably 5 years ago about decentralizing decisions. And it goes through a story, and this was a real story of me trying to get a new team set up. And I needed to spend, I don't know, something $10,000, $12,000, whatever it was, to set up the new team area with desks and some new network drops and a couple of new computers. And in order to spend that $10,000, I had to get CEO approval to do that because the request was over the $10,000 mark. And the time that it took to fill out the request, which I had to fill out on a piece of paper, send to the CEO, which sat in his inbox for a little while, him to sign it or ask questions or whatever it was he did with it and then send it back, it delayed the setting up of this team by a couple of weeks. We can't handle slow decisions like that anymore. There was never a doubt in my mind he was going to approve it. He was actually the one that said we need to set up a team to do this, but I had this hurdle in the way because we couldn't decentralize those decisions and make things happen faster. Mike, anything around decentralized decisions from you?
Yeah, whenever I hear this topic, it always brings back the memory of David Marquette's video when he's talking about the submarine, right? And the two pillars that are needed to support decentralized decision-making, that competence, right? And then the clarity of the direction. And I've seen this in action out in the wild it's interesting because, when you train people and you talk about these concepts and they go, yeah, that's great. We need more of that. And then they're trying to implement something like decentralized decision making in an environment that's always been command and control, that people over years and years and years have learned to kind of, do what they're told, not think for themselves, not take that initiative, and they're nervous to do that. So I always remind people that just because the new policy is decentralized decision making, don't forget that you got to go back and make sure that your culture is changing in a way that facilitates that. Otherwise, you're going to be disappointed with the result.
Decentralize all decisions on day one and watch chaos happen, right?
Yeah, or nothing.
Or nothing. All right. The next one that we kind of thought about was that AI made outputs cheap. And we need to focus on outcomes. Mike, you and I talk about outcomes a lot. I've never heard anyone talk about it more with a client than I hear you talk about it. So tell us your approach with outcomes.
Well, it's interesting because outcomes has now become the sexy word in the industry these days. Outcomes, outcomes, outcomes. There's books. Kirsten's writing a book right now about outputs and outcomes. And the funny thing is that outcomes is, I'm pretty sure, is familiar with everyone in this room, has been a focus for years and years. The difference, I think, now is that it was harder for us to visualize what an outcome would look like until sometime down the road after your PI or whenever your deployment was done, because we just didn't have a mechanism for learning quick enough. So I think that the focus on outcomes is kind of interesting because we have now a mechanism to get that feedback quicker. And I think that we have a better chance at evaluating outcomes at a pace that allows us to learn and react quicker, at least at the development, the product team level. What we do with that information will be interesting, but yeah, so lots of good conversations around outcomes. And I think we're enabled now to take advantage of it more.
Yeah, the kind of discussion in the agile world is, with teams in the old days as of like a couple of years ago, we had to talk about features. We had to talk about stories because we were breaking the work down so that teams could build the thing. And now we can just talk about, I really wish I had a system that did X, Y, and Z, and we can literally type that into AI, and it will give us at least a possible example of a system that would do that. And so we're able to speak a little more easily in outcomes. It's not that it wasn't there. It's not that it wasn't important in the past, but now we can talk about it. We can give it to AI, and in a matter of minutes, we can have something that lets us go, ooh, does that look good or bad? As opposed to a matter of weeks or, a month or 3 or whatever it is. Experimentation. This has always been important. And for whatever reason, it never got the attention that it fully needed. Things would come down from the portfolio, and those things that would come down were assuming we had the right answer. Rarely was it run an experiment on this, and much more it was go build the thing we've already thought about it. But we need to think about lean startup, and we need to think about running good experiments. And when you run a good experiment, it's not just I'm going to test stuff and see what works. You have a hypothesis. You have some steps that you go through to test the outcomes of the experiment and validate your findings. You actually learn from it and adjust the experiment for the future. Because AI made this very quick and very easy to do, the way that we think about experiments and the way that we run them is going to require a little more rigor, a little more thought, and a little more intent behind it. Mike, anything with experiments for you?
Yeah, it really comes back again to what are you going to do with this information and how quickly can you react, right? We talk about the pivot and persevere decision based off of the results of your experiment and how, a healthy organization reacts to that quickly. We're getting this information so quickly now how do we react to it? Because maybe we, in extreme cases require a strategy change, right? We have to change our strategic direction. Do we have a mechanism for that? Are people at the portfolio and leadership level trained to understand what that means and react to it? Or are they in the old mode of, well, we'll meet next month and we'll talk about it then? I think that's the critical step that a lot of folks need to look at a little bit closer.
Yeah, that if I always tell my clients and my students, I'm like, look, if agility is our ability to sense and respond to change, I mean, forget all of the agile frameworks and whatever it is, but if agility is our ability to sense and respond to change, we need that sensing and responding to happen throughout the full stack of the organization. And if we can't respond at the same speed everywhere, it makes it really, really tough.
So there's a comment in the chat I think is interesting. All of that requires stakeholders and decision makers that understand their business well enough to actually understand the OKRs, which provide value, and the KPIs to measure them. Far too many executives care about GSD.
I assume that's getting stuff done.
Stuff, yeah.
Yeah, stuff done. Yeah.
I think that's absolutely true.
Go ahead. Sorry, Mike.
Oh, no, Paul, I think that's absolutely true. I just think that because of the pace of change and because of what your competitors are going to be able to do with this information, if they adjust to it quickly and well, it's the visibility. Leadership's not going to be able to hide from this any longer. There's a client I'm working with now who's going through this conversation, and they realize that they're now in a regulated but competitive environment. They can't afford to take too long to react to these things. They've got to have a competitive advantage. They have to work on that vision. They have to be able to make that future state happen more quickly, and be able to have that business agility that we talk about, right? So I am sure that many leaders are still going to do business as usual, but I'm not sure that they're going to be around for long. Either, the C-suite's going to make changes, or the company is going to have a hard time being competitive. And we start seeing signs of that now.
Mike, you said something that kind of sparked something in my mind. We have to be able to make decisions fast, but when we make them, we shouldn't just make them based on emotion. We should make them based on data, and possibly more important, what is our vision? What's our strategy? And as we make the decision, is it moving us in the right direction? And I think that because of that, having that vision well understood is kind of the first step, so that when the decision point comes up, we can go right back to it and go, we're making the decision because of, and pull up the reason why.
So in that same thread, there's a comment from Bridget. Hi, Bridget. Most companies I've worked with are stuck in the old portfolio style of annual budgeting cycles, typical PMO. How do you get them to change is the big question.
Yeah, so that is really what sparked a lot of the conversation here, is that in all the transformations we've done, and there's been a lot, it's really easy to go in and change the way a team executes. It's easy to set up a way for the teams to communicate, collaborate, and align and run in the same direction. But anytime we start making changes at the portfolio level, they're slower to change. They're more difficult to change. There are things that companies hold on to. When Mike and I were talking the other day, at one of the companies I used to work for before I was doing consulting, we actually had we brought in a project manager to be the interface that would change and make all of the stuff that we were doing within the team to make it fit within the budgeting world that everyone refused to change. And we're actually going to talk about budgeting stuff in 1 or 2 slides, but it's always the slowest to change. And I think the difference is that back then it was okay that it was slow. And now I don't think it's going to be okay anymore. I think it used to, it was just neutral for them to be slow. And I think now it's going to become very painful if they do.
Yeah.
All right. AI shortened feedback loops. We can move faster. We can build things faster. We can get feedback on our tools faster, which means that we have to move faster with our feedback loops. We need to focus on shorter cycles. We need to do more frequent planning. If you're planning a 2-week sprint, that may be too much now. So it's not that those go away. We don't get rid of iterative development. We don't get rid of planning, but we might need to change the pace at which it happens. And this is true from teams all the way up to the portfolio. The portfolio has to have those shorter planning cycles. I don't know who it was in chat that said, hey, we still have annual planning and all that kind of stuff. I don't think annual planning is going to work as good as it used to. We have times where we make a plan in January, and because the technology has shifted so much by March, the things we planned in January are now all obsolete, and we need to do something different. But if we funded something different, then we're not going to keep up. We're going to be building something that became obsolete in the 3 months that we were waiting.
Yeah, and Matt, Scaled Agiles, among other frameworks, are looking at how do we adjust to this? How do we provide guidance in this environment, right? And the planning cycles, the iterations that people go through, a 2-week sprint is kind of going by the wayside. And so as teams start to enable their ability to develop and evaluate code faster, right? What they deliver, to see if they have achieved these outcomes. It's really driving this need to look at the whole system and reevaluate it to say, is this really working for us now? Or do we need to adopt these things? And just backtracking a bit, this is why Matt and I are talking about the values and principles today, because these things, I think, for the most part, are going to be consistent, but the mechanisms we use to execute these things with, to make sure that we're doing things in the right way, I think is open for discussion and change. And that's happening everywhere right now. One of the things I did want to point out with this slide is that I was concerned that teams were going to be developing so quickly, but they weren't going to take time to evaluate and learn after those outputs were pushed out and deployed. And to my surprise, many of my clients have been addressing that without having to be poked and prodded. But they're looking at a combination of synthetic data, where they're asking AI to feed back to them, hey, this was our outcome, this is what we did. I'm paraphrasing. What do you think, persona of a typical customer? What do you think? And that synthetic data is useful. But where it really shines is when you bring a human into that mold and you evaluate it in partnership with that synthetic data to get some real good, solid feedback. I think that partnership has made the feedback mechanism stronger, certainly stronger than one or the other, and has allowed us to focus on outcomes much quicker.
Yeah, Mike, it makes me think. In fact, Paul put something in the chat. He said, "What's the point of quarterly type planning if Claude can make my entire backlog, my entire portfolio backlog in a week?" And he says, "Never mind that what it produces might be slop." I think that's key. It's like I don't know if AI will ever be there, but it's certainly not there now for us just to turn everything over to it. We have to have that human in the loop, and that is at every step along the way, as we are preparing the work to work on it, as we are doing the work and building the thing, as we are testing and validating the thing, and as we are, like Mike was saying, as we're learning from the user. We can't just trust that AI is going to, it'll tell you every time. AI is very, very nice. And it'll tell you, yes, I think this is great, and I love the way it does these things, and the clients and customers are going to do this, that, and the other with it. It's nice that you think that, but we still have to go back to the user. The human in the loop may not always be us. We may have to go back to our customer and bring them into the loop. And of according to kind of the direction here, we might have to do it faster because we're producing more stuff sooner. We may have to bring them in faster or more frequently, I guess is probably more accurate. All right. Delivery cost was reduced. I can now crank through 6 months worth of a backlog in just a week or two. What do? We have to change the way we fund. I think everybody has heard this in the past. You should fund the teams, not the work. We don't want to have a project that we assign people to the project, and then when the project is done, we shut it down. And we go through a lot of time and effort trying to estimate how much this project is going to cost. Fund the teams is not a new concept. It's something that when an organization figures out that the biggest cost that they have is the people, and that it can be a relatively fixed cost. You go, you know what? For this next quarter, I've got 57 people. And if I look at those 57 people and they have an hourly rate of $100 an hour and they work 40 hours a week, I can do the math and I can figure out how much it's going to cost. I take away a lot of overhead in the way that I think about my work. And the overhead shifts, or the focus shifts to where I'm no longer thinking about the work and how much is that work going to cost. I'm thinking about what's the most important work that I can do. How can I prioritize that to be the highest priority work that's there so that the next time the team has time to do something, they can pull it into their process and get it done. By funding the people and not the work, that overhead removal removes a lot of conversations at the portfolio level, which maybe lets us focus on some of the things in the previous slides, decentralizing some of the decisions. What kind of experiment do we run? Can we run 5 experiments instead of 1 and get good information and good data from multiple points? Those kinds of conversations can open up because we're no longer talking just about, is this project over, under, is it ahead of schedule, behind schedule? That stuff is going to slow us down, and we can't have that these days.
Matt, there's a couple of questions in chat that I think are worth pausing to address. So Brigitte's got one, or maybe it's Bridget, but I'm going to go with Brigitte. Sorry, Brigitte, if it's wrong. Her question, and Robert's got a good one too. So Brigitte, to address your question, I'll let Matt address Robert's, but the idea that I have a business degree. I got my business degree back in the 80s. Many other things we're talking about these days that people are writing books about still are ideas that germinated back in the 80s, maybe even to the 60s, right? So I think those concepts are kind of constant across that time frame. But the one thing I have noticed in business programs is that very few of them talk about lean and agile. Right? They talk about accounting, they talk about marketing, but ways of working in an organization seems to be, even in classes like organizational theory and organizational behavior, those things that are so important to us now still aren't on the curriculum, which I think creates, now project management, everybody talks about project management. So the question is, back to Brigitte's point, if they're all learning about project management still, and we're having to change their minds when the concept was formed when they were college students, that puts us behind the 8 ball, right? And it's been a challenge. Many folks have said, I think, I forget who it was, but someone mentioned something about how do we change their thought from project funding to funding value streams? That's a tough one, but I'm encouraged by the fact that at least the clients that I'm dealing with are forced into that conversation now because they see how slow and expensive it is to have a cost center mindset. I can't speak for all the clients out there, but I'm encouraged with what I'm seeing.
Yeah, and I agree with that. When I'm with a client and I bring up the funding situation, everyone is always scared of it. Because usually the people that we're working with are not the people that came up with the funding model, controlled the funding model. They are the tail that is getting wagged by the dog. And every one of them comes up with some sort of a transition layer. They come up with a way to make it less painful. I've only had one or two clients that have been able to dive in and actually make some deeper change. But the thing that works the best, you have to show the value of the switch. You have to understand the pain that you go through now to make stuff happen, and you have to understand what benefits you get from the change and how that benefit is going to change all of your processes. Because changing your funding model is kind of like AI. Once you make the change, a bottleneck is going to appear somewhere else. It's none of this is a silver bullet. But having that conversation and having good change management approaches to these kinds of changes is huge. You have to understand the urgency of what's going on. You have to build a guiding coalition around it. You have to have a vision around what I'm going to do. I mean, I'm totally quoting from Cotter's book right here, but it's always the same. There has to be an urgency to do it in the beginning. And all too often, that urgency has been, I don't know if muted over time, or it just becomes the way we work. We all hear that a lot. Oh, that's just how it happens here. We have to pull people out of that and help them see the reality of what's going on. Yeah, Ryan, burning platforms from Cotter. I think he changed his language here lately, and it's the sense of urgency, I think is what he calls it now. I like burning platforms too, though.
Matt, one of the things I wanted to add to what you're saying was that we have to stop and think that those legacy and policies and practices that are in place we're stumbling over these days, they're in place for a reason. And we have to understand what that is. Something bad happened, and this policy was put in place to control that, to mitigate that risk. If we're not addressing that core, that root cause that was driving that change, then we're likely not going to have a successful migration to something different, because we're not addressing the real problem. So maybe the problem's faded away, I don't know. But that conversation is something that you've got to have and get people aligned around.
And I think that's a little bit of the point of the slides. We've been through, what, 5 or 6 of them here, where we talk about how the principles now matter more. As we are talking about these changes, these principles lead us in the mindset that we need to have as we're proposing changes. You can't just walk in and say, C-suite, we need to start decentralizing decisions. They will be like, I don't know what that means. I don't know why you're saying. I mean, they'll just pause and look at you funny. We need to understand and have processes and steps in place that will help us decentralize decisions. We are helping them learn the mindset as we go, not just walking in and giving edicts that we need to decentralize all decisions today. We need to do it in a methodical way, but we need to understand why we're doing it and what the benefit of doing it is.
Yep.
All right, this is the last principle that we're going to focus on here today. AI reduce sunk costs. It kind of follows the experimentation thing, right? But with AI, I'm saying, here, develop this thing, and if I don't like it, guess what I can do with it? I can get rid of it. I don't hold on to it so tightly. And so we need to focus on pivoting without mercy or guilt. When we come up with something, I wish I could remember the full phrase, but it's strong ideas held lightly. I think maybe that's what it is. It's when I create something, I need to go, hey, I think this might be good. Oh, wait, never mind, it isn't. I can do something better. And I need to get rid of it quickly, because if we stay stuck on the wrong thing for too long, then we're going to end up in the wrong place. But because AI can create stuff relatively inexpensively compared to what we used to. It used to take a couple of weeks to get something out of a sprint, and now I can get it in a couple of hours out of AI. I shouldn't hold on to those things as long. I should get rid of them much quicker. I should be getting rid of, I'm making up a number, 80% of the code that we create, we should get rid of it, because we're like, nah, we can do something better. And it only takes me 15 minutes to do the better. Therefore, I'm going to go off and do it better. Mike, any thoughts on this one?
Oh, so many thoughts. I was kind of biting my tongue as you were going through it because I have so much to share on this one. But I would ask the folks listening today and contributing in chat, have you ever seen someone's ego get in the way of making a pivot or persevere decision? If someone has a pet project, let's say a VP, right? What happens when a VP has a pet project and all of a sudden they're faced with, your great idea, Mike. Environment, is very difficult to make a healthy pivot or persevere decision.
Mike, I don't know if it was you or me, but I heard a pause in your answer there. Did anybody else hear that pause? Or was it? Can you re-say it, Mike?
So that environment where executives feel uncomfortable making a healthy pivot or persevere decision because their reputation, maybe their next promotion is riding on this thing. It's very difficult, right? And one of the things that I like to encourage folks that, there have been plenty of comments in chat about metrics, OKRs, KPIs, other metrics. Use them to create visibility around whether it should be a pivot or persevere decision. And let that sink in without judgment and let the room kind of digest it a bit. And you will naturally see people go, you know what, we're looking at the answer. It's just kind of staring us in the face. I don't think we can justify anything else other than whatever that's indicating. So metrics, KPIs, OKRs are your friend in this conversation, especially as you're trying to move from a new way of working and people are working as a team of teams or working more individually or moving from working individually. It's important to be able to give them a safe place and environment. And those metrics are kind of a neutral way of having that conversation.
I always like to help teams understand that metrics do nothing but help us tell a story. The metrics don't give us decisions or anything. They are oftentimes neither good nor bad. It just helps us tell a story, and we should be using them in that way. We should pull those metrics and go, here, they have to be good. They have to be useful metrics.
Yeah. And visibility is your friend.
All right. What about planning? Can we stop planning? Can we stop planning at the portfolio level? Can we just decentralize all of the decisions and let the teams come up with their hypotheses and run them through AI? And the answer is no. We still need to have plans throughout the entire organization. Plans are there to help us align and understand what direction we're trying to run in. Plans are there to give predictability. And I will say that early on, AI is going to insert some lack of predictability into our planning because it's new. We're learning to use a new tool. This may be a terrible metaphor here, but if normally I use a shovel to dig a hole and it takes me 6 hours to dig this standard hole, and all of a sudden I have a backhoe, I don't know how long it's going to take for me to now dig holes. And what happens when I can dig the hole in 5 minutes, but it takes me an hour to get the backhoe into the position because there's not a clear trail or whatever, right? There's just a lot of unknowns in the way that we're going to work in the future. But we're going to figure them out fast. But we're going to need that predictability when it's there.
Matt, in your analogy, the other thing is we have to learn how to use the backhoe.
We do have to learn.
There's this thing sitting here, paid a lot of money for it. How do we use it? And how do we change the way we're working? Because this is a new tool, a new way of delivering our value. I think there's a lot of conversation going around with people figuring out what does that look like. And it's not just how and what, it's when, how often, right? This cycle of, I'll just say this cycle of 3 months PI planning, let's have 2-week sprints. I think unless your organization's not migrating to any sort of leverage of AI at all, those days are going to quickly be past us. So what should it look like? We're all Still trying to figure that out, but it's going to be quicker. That's one thing.
The last point is sustainability. As we plan, it helps us look into the future. We have these roadmaps that help us look into the future as to where we're going. If we don't know where we're going, we never know where we're going to end up. What was it that Cheshire Cat said? Well, where would you like to go, or where are you trying to get? And Alice in Wonderland said, "I don't know." And he says, "Then I don't think it matters which path you go down." So we're trying to create something that is sustainable for the future within the organization. And then, as Mike said, how we plan and what we plan, absolutely it's going to be different, but we absolutely can't skip the idea of planning. All right. As Mike and I were doing this, Mike goes, "Matt, we really, really need to talk about design thinking, and we got to talk about product development because these are central. We can't leave these ideas out." Go ahead, Mike.
Well, I'm not, this slide's not new to anyone on this call. The customer centricity, design thinking, the idea of building the right thing, that connection to the customer has been something we've all been striving for the last 20 some years, right? I think with AI now available, it's because our pace is going so much quicker. We really have to nail this down first because, how much effort are we going to spend? How much value are we going to push out the door if we really don't understand whether it's the right thing or not? And then how far are we going to get down in these deployments, and how much value and money are we going to spend around them and not be able to go, you know what? We evaluated this thing and it did the job or it didn't do the job. I mean, these concepts are central to building the right thing and then evaluating it after we've delivered it to see if we're achieving the outcome that we're looking for, and that we're closer to the customer and helping in the service of the customer, delivering value to them. These things have always been important, but I think they're so urgent now because if you aren't doing this, you are in a heap of trouble because you're not going to be able to make the right choices, and you're not going to know if those choices are even delivering the value, the outcomes that you're looking for.
Yeah, from just watching and watching the students that come to our public classes and talking to our clients and the types of workshops that they request. I don't know if it's the most frequently, but it's very, very often. It sits in this world. It's how do we understand the products that we're building? How do we understand the value that they provide? How do we understand whether or not we provided that value? They're always asking us those questions. And we've set up workshops to help them, but just the fact that it comes up so frequently makes me think that organizations know this is a gap. The thing that I think is going to be key is that AI is going to expose this gap much more than we've seen it in the past.
So we have a question in the chat. What kinds of businesses outside of software dev are using Lean Agile?
Well, Lean grew up in the manufacturing world. So it started with Toyota and cars moving down a production line.
Yeah.
Agile was specifically developed by software developers, but we've seen it in other places, healthcare, hardware type development.
Healthcare is a good one, Matt. Good example. Obviously, many of us deal with software-focused companies, and that's where we've gotten a lot of our Lean Agile experience from. But it should be used by more environments. I'm encouraged by, Hannah, maybe you want to speak to this, but I'm encouraged with the amount of marketing departments and HR departments that are starting to lean into Lean and Agile with, here's how I kind of visualize it. It was easy for software developers to embrace these concepts because it didn't require much of a mind shift change for them. But when you try to apply these concepts in an environment where they don't have the tools to make it happen, maybe it's a bridge too far. That gap between desire and knowledge is too far. Like many HR and marketing departments prior to this, it was difficult for them to do that. Now they've got an AI buddy, right? And they've got training and we're able to focus. And that's the kind of thing that can help bridge those gaps.
I can absolutely concur, especially for marketing. I speak to CMOs pretty regularly, and the draw towards Agile was growing before the AI explosion because delivering a campaign looks a lot like delivering a piece of software. It goes through the same checkpoints, it goes through the same handoffs. Teams are still organized functionally instead of teams that can deliver value on its own. But with the AI adoption, now suddenly every marketing organization is a development organization, is building tracking systems, skipping a lot of automation tools altogether. The demand has grown exponentially, and I'm hearing this in HR as well.
I'm gonna look at Paul's comment up here. Oh, it just rolled off the screen. Let me go back. He says, I'd argue that after 20 years, most software companies that claim to be agile really aren't. I'll tell you that
Sorry,
the ones,
couldn't help it.
Yeah, the ones that claim that I'm doing the process, therefore I'm agile. I had one, this is 3 or 4 months ago. They were telling me how agile they were because they implemented Jira. And I was like, I don't know if you're agile or not, but I don't think that implementing Jira has a balance one way or the other in that equation. But the ones that I think are more agile than others are the ones that worry less about the process and worry more about the principles and the mindset. And they understand that there's more than one way to be iterative. There's more than one way to stop and inspect the way our team is running and adjust it. So a retrospective every 2 weeks is great. It's fine. But maybe there's better ways, and they've implemented stuff in other ways, and keeping that mindset and principles more than the process is huge. And I think that that's part of what is helping these practices spread to other areas like marketing and fintech. And there's a bunch of them that were listed in chat there, is that these new areas are looking at it a little more from a mindset because they know that traditional Scrum may not work the way that it would for a software team. And so they have to switch, but they can rely on some of that mindset more than the steps, more than the process, more than installing Jira.
Paul has some very strong feelings, strongly held on this one, but I I'm with you, Paul. So, this is an experience that we have in pretty much every client we deal with, right? Because they know what they know. They know their context. They don't have as much visibility as many of the people on this call would about what's happening outside of their organization. And so they think, well, we're agile. I went to a class and we're doing, stand-ups and whatever else, right? So I think that the first thing we have to do as a group is to recognize their context. They are where they are, right? Hopefully they'll be, when you start to uncover some of the things gently that they're missing, they'll embrace those. And this is where leadership, support and engagement is so important, because if leadership is creating an environment where they can be retrospective and go, you know what, I don't think we're doing things the way we should be. Let's talk about that. If they can have that kind of environment, then bravo, right? Because they're going to be successful. That continuous improvement, that relentless improvement is going to take root. But yeah, it starts from the top, I think.
And I think that's it. It's continuing the theme of the whole webinar here, right? There's some principles that need more focus right now. And our fear is, our hypothesis is that if they don't get more focus in the very near future, it's going to cause chaos within an organization. Organizations have to learn to apply these lean and agile principles, not just at a team level with people that are trying to build the thing, but it has to be throughout the full stack of the organization. Everybody's going to need to look at things just a little bit differently. All right, we're getting near the end, but the question isn't whether or not your teams are ready for AI. The question is whether your leadership system is ready for AI speed learning. We have to learn faster. We have to be a sensing organization, and we have to respond to the things as they come up. And in this world that we're in now with AI, the world is changing faster than it was yesterday. And tomorrow it's going to change faster than it did today. And our organization has to keep up. Everybody, the famous ones, right? Blockbuster, Kodak, all these organizations that used to be the thing have now dwindled, and some of them are gone. And it's a possible reality for many organizations today. This is just the spark. It's the change that is happening, and they have to figure out how to respond. With that, we'll open it up for Q&A. We've got a lot of good stuff going in the chat here.
Lots of good comments. I think your subject struck a chord, Matt.
So there's been a couple messages throughout this recommending books, recommending thought leadership. Matt, Michael, while people are coming up with their final questions, where do you go for knowledge? Who do you turn to as you're learning and on your AI journey?
Matt, do you want to address that one first?
Yeah, I will tell you that for me, I do a lot of reading on the internet. I do a lot of reading on LinkedIn, and there's a lot of good thought leaders out there. But usually, as I'm reading some of these short blog posts and things, I'm like, I don't know how deep to go here. And then I use AI as my thinking buddy to help me. And I will put a big prompt into AI, and I'll say, hey, somebody on LinkedIn put this, and I have these questions about it, and what other resources can I have? And AI will lead me to 46,000 other things that I can go, and it will continue the conversation for months and months and months if I want it to, just giving me new things to look at. I try to, at least a little bit, avoid asking AI for its interpretation of things, and I try to ask it to give me other things to go read. But I use AI to help me know what to read, what to look for, how to look for it, what to dive into, and stuff like that.
Michael?
Yeah, so yes to everything Matt said. One of the things that I've found is there's no single source of truth right now. And I think that's a symptom of the fact that this is also new. I mean, AI has been around. Anybody ever heard of Visual Age for Java back in the late 90s? So there were things that helped Demetrius. I hated it. But there have been tools around that have tried to help us do the things we're trying to do now, but not to the degree they have been in the last 2 or 3 years. And so while this has been a subject that's been slowly developing, that knowledge base really is relatively new. So there's not an establishment of sources that I would say go here and you'll get it all. I think you have to kind of cherry pick on the subjects that make sense to you. And if you have not figured out how to do a sound prompt, I would encourage you to solve that problem first. If prompting opens up so many doors for you. But I will say that as someone who's been in the industry for a while and is somewhat accomplished, AI doesn't bring a lot of new stuff when it comes to understanding these concepts to someone like me. But what it does bring is a different perspective. And sometimes that perspective is fresh enough to go, you know what? I've always been thinking about it this way. And this is kind of a cool idea. So that partner that Matt's talking about, being able to work with AI that way, I think is true for all of us. I think it's just going to be different depending on the subject matter that you're after. If you're learning something relatively new, AI is going to blow your mind. If you're trying to add another perspective to something you understand pretty well, you're going to be disappointed often, but I think that over time, you're going to see different perspectives that will maybe tickle a new idea in your brain.
GPT and I are opening up a appliance repair company because we fixed my broken refrigerator a couple of weeks ago. So ask it how to
Awesome.
fix your refrigerator. It's great.
Any
Brian is
opinions
asking us to do a
on
complete another webinar on AI native safe because there is so much information packed in that.
And dude, that is an interesting, very dynamic environment right now. But yeah, that would be great one to talk about because they're leading up to having a full comprehensive release by the time of the summit in the middle of September. So they're releasing topics of that along the way. But yeah, Matt, I'd be excited about doing something like that with you.
Yeah. Brian, my first opinion of it, because I'm learning about it as everybody else is. I don't know if you know or not, but they're running a webinar series. It's every other week. Anyway, I'm learning just at the same rate that everybody else is about it, but it talks about the same realization that we're coming to, that AI is changing the foundation of everything that we know in Safe's case in the product development world. I think it's bigger, right? I think it's changing the way that everything functions across an organization, being in operations or HR or marketing or wherever. But it's changing the foundation. And we can't just assume that the processes we used yesterday, 3-month PIs, 2-week sprints, fill in the blank with whatever, even the roles, RTE, Scrum Masters, product owners, they're looking at all of it and saying, we think all of this could change. And I don't want to claim, and I don't think they want to claim that it's going to be 100% right because this hasn't existed before. But it's a new framework based on principles and mindsets that we've used in the past that have changed for this new reality that we're in. And I think we have to look at it that way and go through and find out, hey, is this right? Does it make sense? Is it still providing the outcomes that we want, given the new view that we're looking at it through?
Well, everyone, that's a wonderful note to end on. That is the end of our time box. Thank you so much for joining us today. We will follow up with a recording of this if you need to reference it later. And please let us know if you have questions or ideas for future webinars. Have a good day.
Thanks, folks. Appreciate the interaction.
Take care.